I think the way the general community view life with Down syndrome or an intellectual disability is probably the biggest challenge that those people still encounter. People with Down syndrome want the same as everyone else. They want to live independently, have a job, have relationships, but the perception in the general community is often that those things can't be achieved. So that's what we need to change in order for a successful and independent life to be achieved.
But I think there's still huge stigma attached to it. And I think that there are some very old-fashioned opinions on what happens to a family who have a child with Down syndrome and what someone with Down syndrome can achieve and do. And I think that's really important for us to change.
It would be great if, and in all aspects of people living with a disability, if people could just start to break those barriers down and see the reality of a human being sitting in front of them, and that human being, like us all, just wants to contribute and have a meaningful life like everybody else.
I think that the stigma around disability is likely to continue until we get that full inclusion. So one of the things that would be wonderful is if we saw people with Down syndrome, working in our hospitals and, working in our schools, for example.
And the stigma around that lack of potential to live a socially included, engaged life is one that we just have to battle constantly.
Just like any other condition, there's a wide range of variability. And the majority of kids with Down syndrome will do things quite well, but they'll need some extra help getting there. If those can be the explanations in a more balanced way of the positive versus the focus on the initial of the negative only, and so prospective parents can walk away with a much more balanced view from a health professional, that can make a big difference.
This is not an experience which you can read about in a textbook and really understand.
Well, I think health professionals can't provide realistic information to families if they don't know themselves. So it's beholden on people in a position to share information to actually find out. And so they need to take the initiative to engage with the community in some ways.
I think the key to a healthcare professional having the most up-to-date information on what it is like to live with Down syndrome, and I would say this for many other areas, is to actually hear from the mouths of the people that have Down syndrome, people that have the lived experience, that are out there advocating for themselves, and the family members that are also advocating. They need to hear from those people that are actually living that experience in terms of what would they say to a prospective family that are welcoming a child with Down syndrome? Is that this is about, we have individuals that are living with a different chromosomal condition to everybody else, but they still have the right to great healthcare and a meaningful life. So it's how they then adapt to treating a person with Down syndrome instead of trying to fix a person with Down syndrome.
I think medical and healthcare professionals have a reasonable understanding of the challenges that people with disability face. I think there's always opportunities for them to make sure they're up to speed with the current situation and the current challenges that people with disability have, particularly as the NDIS has come in and influences that.
One of the biggest problems, I think, is that the medicine is still ruled by that medical model of disability. So it says the problem of disability is the impairment, the diagnosis. And people with disability have been saying for several decades, they've been talking about a social model of disability, which is that the barriers that make life hard when you have a disability are in society. So it's, lack of access to high quality medical services or education. It's the lack of physical access. It's the lack of understanding.
Exposure is what makes a difference about knowledge. Understanding what someone else is going through, being able to empathize and see what they're actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis will make a difference in how you can support them and how you explain the information when we're facing things like prenatal screening. So certainly involvement in groups, community involvement, and fundraisers and things that are related to these specific syndromes or disability conditions is a huge, great way to involve more people in the process.
those with Down syndrome and chromosomal conditions as part of our society. They need to see what they're capable of, and they need to see them going to the shops and going to school and kicking a football and swimming. They need to see them in everyday life to try to break down years and years and years and years of people thinking that they are incapable of doing any of those things.
We are people with Down syndrome, not Down syndrome people. Down syndrome does not define who I am.
Today, people with Down syndrome can look forward to a long life with the right medical support.
So I think if we take a step back from that and acknowledge that, you know, life is not going to be perfect and it's the imperfections that make it wonderful, it makes I think it will create a different lens for people in terms of their acceptance of each other. And I certainly don't want a society where everyone is exactly the same and everybody is 100% healthy and wonderful and living their best life. I want people that are actually different and unique and have different perspectives and bring challenges that make us all think and keep us on our toes. So I think it's that perspective of life that needs to change a little bit, and that's people and that's health professionals together.
I think the segregating people with disability from an early age into special schools and into special employment and special housing really acts to perpetuate that stigma, because people with disability aren't known in our community, and that's a loss of their gifts and contributions.
Once we've got that social inclusion happening, we're going to come a long way to removing stigma across society.
I think we've got to get over this, they are different. They are just a spectrum of what we all are. They are individuals in their own right. They achieve incredible things. I think it's fantastic to see things like I've seen recently where a group of adolescents with Down syndrome got up and spoke at Customs House at World Down Syndrome Day met with Jeanette Young. That was fantastic. I think it's incredible to see Down syndrome, individuals with Down syndrome being research assistants. It's fantastic. We should be promoting that. We should be doing that more. So I think that if we're going to help society make that change, then as healthcare professionals, we've got to lead the way, and we have to be recognizing that things have changed and that actually a child with Down syndrome has just as much potential as another child. They just think a bit differently. They just do things in their own way. That doesn't mean that they can't achieve.
It's important with healthcare professionals that we can continue to support their learning around what it means to live with Down syndrome in the current times. Things have moved a lot in the last 15 to 20 years, and that's the position that we want them to be presenting, is the current view of living with Down syndrome.
And actually advocate for all the amazing things that these young people and adults with Down syndrome are doing. They're achieving fantastic things, and I've seen it for myself, and I'm very privileged to be part of that community that gets to see it on a regular basis. But I think talking about that, putting it out there in the media, really celebrating the achievements that they're having. And I think probably the biggest thing is giving a voice to them and their families, letting them tell their stories, because that's so powerful, and letting people see that it isn't all about being in hospital or being a burden, because that's the reality of what a lot of people feel is the case.